just missed some vocabulary in the first part of it, but that's okay. All right. And yeah, Worcester v. Georgia, guys, that's the Supreme Court case. You must know that one. That's the one where the Cherokee actually win the Supreme Court case. But Andrew Jackson, our president, says, well, Marshall's made his ruling. Now let him enforce it. And he continues to let the state of Georgia violate Cherokee sovereignty. So please be aware of that Supreme Court case, and we'll go over that in more detail. And also this vocabulary term, universal white male suffrage. You got to know. Most of our states have eliminated property ownership as a requirement to vote. Remember, guys, before the 1820s, if you didn't own property, it's unlikely you were voting, even if you were a white male. We've basically done away with that. Poor white men are able to vote by the 1820s. And that is part of the reason why states' rights and the ideas of Jefferson kind of take the forefront. The Federalists ruled when, voting was restricted to property ownership. Now that universal white male suffrage is a thing, Jacksonian Democrats have a lot more of a political voice, I would say. And then Panic of 1837, guys, that's a huge economic catastrophe. I don't know how it's going to come up in a DBQ. I'm not going to focus a lot on it. I'll address it on a different day when I'm not going to talk Andrew Jackson, but just be aware of what it is. It's kind of like the Panic of 1873. It's nice if you know what it is, but I promise you're not in bad shape if you don't know it. So anyhow, let's just do over the next 15 minutes, guys. Let's do the first 1 or 2 or 3 learning targets. We'll probably do these 3 today, and then we'll do the next ones tomorrow. Cool. So we're recording, we're screen sharing, we're good to go. American system. You guys we already started talking about it, and you got to know who supports it and who opposes it. But you have to know what it is first. And what it is, guys, it is an economic system based on strong interventions by the federal government. And when I say that, guys, remember, we are trying to be a nation of manufacturers that competes with Great Britain. And Great Britain can outcompete us. They've been doing it for way longer. They industrialize quicker than us. They can make products cheaper than we can. That's why we have the tariffs. Tariffs are an integral part of the American system. Tariffs protect American manufacturers. It's the same logic why Donald Trump has put tariffs on something like foreign steel. He's trying to prop up the American steel manufacturing industry by making foreign steel more expensive, basically incentivizing you to buy American. That's part of the American system. Henry Clay supports it. Andrew Jackson and many other Southerners and states' rights advocates, they do not support tariffs, guys. They say, hey, wait a minute. Why do I have to pay more for a product just so some business in another state can stay in business? I don't care if that factory in New England goes out of business. I want to buy the cheaper shirt. You're making me burden the cost of keeping that business in another state alive, essentially afloat. You're subsidizing a business and making another citizen burden the cost of it. That's the argument, guys, that South Carolina is going to take on. So I'm going to jump. Well, I guess I won't jump right to tariff, but I started already talking about the tariff war right there. We'll finish American system real quick, guys. So it's tariffs. It is also federally funded internal improvements. This is okay for the federal government to make bridges. It's okay for the federal government to make roads, specifically if it's going to help facilitate interstate commerce. Remember, guys, who controls interstate commerce? The federal government. If your business is going between 2 states, more often than not, the government has the right to regulate it. That was the Supreme Court decision of Gibbons v. Ogden. That's part of the Marshall Court. We'll talk more about that in a different video, but that's, again, one of those Marshall Court decisions that strengthens the federal government. Interstate commerce. Guys, this is all about the American system. When you think market revolution, start thinking about the American system as well. Internal improvements. A Bank of the United States that is handing out uniform American currency and can give businesses loans. Guys, there's nothing in the Constitution about the Fed that I'm aware of that gives the federal government necessarily the explicit authority to loan your business money. But remember, under the elastic clause, those who believe that the Constitution, is kind of a living document that is open to interpretation. I don't know if I worded that well, but they believe, guys, that no, the federal government absolutely has the right to make a bank, to print currency, and to give out federal loans to businesses. It's all part of the American system. Hopefully you've got it. Bank of the United States, tariffs, federally funded improvements. Jacksonians don't like the American system. Federalists and Whigs do. Cool. Guys, I'm going to skip the second learning target. It's just not that important. When we're cramming for a DBQ about Andrew Jackson, I don't want you to remember that. Let's go over to tariff abominations. We've already started explaining half of it. We have tariffs propping up northern manufacturers at the expense of the citizens of the United States. I am paying more for a basic everyday good just so a business in another state can stay in business. This is where John C. Calhoun, guys, who is our vice president, remember that. He's Andrew Jackson's vice president. John C. Calhoun is so outraged by this that he resigns the office of the vice presidency to go back to his home state of South Carolina to act as a senator. As Senator of South Carolina, John C. Calhoun leads them through the nullification crisis, guys. South Carolina threatens to secede from the Union unless the tariff is abolished, guys. Think about that for a second. That's a state threatening to leave the United States because they're upset about a tariff. Now, you know, I'm not an economist, and I'm frankly not that smart when it comes to economics. I don't know if it's an oppressive thing or not for these people, really, guys, but it's a very serious issue in their mind. They are ready to leave the country over this issue. And so Andrew Jackson is faced with quite the predicament here, folks. If he lets South Carolina walk away, he looks like a very weak and ineffectual president. And essentially, he has his authority trampled by one single state, South Carolina. If one state can leave the Union over any issue they want, this country's going to fall apart, guys. It's pretty easy to see how if South Carolina leaves over a tariff issue, how another state's going to leave over something later, and the dominoes are going to fall, and the nation's just simply going to fall apart, guys. The same logic applies during the Civil War in the 1860s. We've got to keep the Union together. Jackson, as our president, his goal is also to keep the Union together. He cannot just let South Carolina walk away. So as South Carolina is threatening to secede from the Union, Andrew Jackson has got a political battle on his hands, and this is called the nullification crisis. And he solves it in a very, very smart and politically shrewd way. Andrew Jackson, while simultaneously asserting his authority, gets South Carolina to back down. And here's how he does it. Andrew Jackson gets a law passed through Congress called a force bill. Now, that force bill allows Andrew Jackson to use the military to collect the tariff in South Carolina. He tells South Carolina that if you guys don't pay the tariff, I'm coming in with the military to collect it. I'm asserting federal authority. We are collecting this tariff from you guys. But I realize it's a little bit much and oppressive, so let's get that tariff reduced to a much lower rate. Guys, that's all the Southerners want. Well, I mean, I'm sure they would rather have no tariff, but they're going to accept that deal. Andrew Jackson flexes his federal authority, doesn't get walked all over. He keeps the Union together while simultaneously gives the South Carolinians and all the Southerners essentially a concession by making the tariff a little bit less of a financial burden on them. That is a very smart and shrewd political moment. And again, guys, what that is all about is about the bigger picture of state authority versus federal authority. That's what the Tariff of Abominations is in the context of, the debate over state authority and federal authority. And you don't have any questions about the tariff, guys? You might not remember all the details about it. Some of stuff like, wait, I don't remember the force bill, and there's something about like the military I don't remember. I mean, that may be you guys, but if you can remember that nullification is all about the state's ability to nullify federal law. South Carolina said this tariff is not valid. We're not paying it. We're going to leave the Union before we pay it. Who decides what's constitutional? That's what the issue is. So don't necessarily sweat all the details, but when you see nullification, you got to remember it's about a tariff, and it's about who has the authority to declare something unconstitutional. Whether it's an Alien and Sedition Act in 1800, like Jefferson tried to do with the Kentucky and Virginia resolves, or whether it's a tax you don't like. Anytime you mention these topics, guys, you got to connect them. If you're talking about the Alien Sedition Acts, you should be talking about the nullification crisis. Make sense, the connection? Cool. I think that we should maybe stop there. Tariff, I'll do bank war, and I will do Indian removal tomorrow. Those will be the topics tomorrow. We've already started this one, guys, which is comparing and contrasting Whigs and Jacksonian Democrats. Remember, Whigs are the old Federalists. If you were a Federalist and you believed in federal authority, you basically became a Whig. But if you were a Jefferson, you believed in states' rights and small federal government, you probably became a Jacksonian. Now, there's a little bit more complexity to it than that, guys, but at its basis form, if you can remember that, then you're probably going to be good to go. Whigs are the new Federalists, basically, and Jacksonians are the old Jefferson Republicans. That's how I'm going to simplify it. Everything's always more complex. Speak up.
The Whigs support the American system.
Whigs support the American system. Absolutely. Henry Clay is a Whig. John Adams is dead by this time, but he would have been a Whig. So yes. Good question. That's where I will stop. Anyone else have any follow-up questions, guys, for this, for chapter 10? Again, we'll finish it tomorrow. I'll try and talk more about the vocabulary at the bottom part of this list. This is a good court case. It's definitely not one of the top 15 to know, but it's an interesting one from the Taney court. So we'll talk about this stuff in detail tomorrow, bottom half of it. Yeah, go ahead.
I forget. I mean, I don't think this is important at all, but I was just wondering, is like Andrew Jackson like generally liked by the public or not? I forget.
In his time, yes. In general,
Okay.
Andrew Jackson is a popular president. He is known as kind of the hero of the common man. Now, Dre,
Okay.
that doesn't mean 90% of the country loves him, but it certainly means probably 60% of the country favors what he is doing. The Whigs, the business interest in the North. If you're a Northern business owner, you hate Andrew Jackson because you like the tariff in general. And actually, let's back up a second. Guys, even though Jackson makes South Carolina pay the tariff, Jackson is not a lover of the tariff in general. He can't let the nation fall apart. So it makes it sound like he's in favor of the tariff. He's not in general. He is way more worried about the nation falling apart, though, than he is about opposing a tariff. Jacksonians are going to oppose the tariff, even though Andrew Jackson himself makes South Carolina pay for it. Guys, it's about the nation falling apart. The nation literally almost started collapsing over that. That's what Andrew Jackson was concerned about. So when you see Jacksonians, please think that they oppose the tariff. Hopefully that made sense.
Yes.
Cool. Yeah. I think that's all we'll do. Go ahead.
No, I just saw in the chat Bethany had a question.
Oh, chat. Let's see. Is it important to understand how the second party system developed? That is a good question, Bethany. Let's see. Bethany, the answer to that question is yes. And it's such a good question that I can't answer it right now. I need to do a little research before I answer that question, Bethany, because I don't want to give you a stupid short answer. The era of good feelings is something I barely understand, and I don't normally see you tested on it. Now, with that, Bethany, I'm just trying to highlight my own shortcoming. We need to read about it, including myself. And yes, so the answer to your question is it is important to understand that, Bethany. I'm going to do a little bit of reading tonight so I can better answer that question tomorrow. I just don't want to sound ignorant or give you wrong information. So great. Folks, I love it when you speak up like that. So please do it. In terms of how the party system developed, well, the main way that the party system developed is through universal white male suffrage. Once you get more and more people voting, Bethany, that's going to really lead to the changing policies. Now, all of a sudden, if I'm a politician, I got to really care about what the common, poor white man wants. And so that is going to lead to the development of the new party system. So that's my short answer for your first part of the question, Bethany. How does the second party system develop? The easiest answer for that is universal white male suffrage. The elimination of property rights makes it so now elected officials, they kind of have to care about what the common man wants. They didn't really have to care about what the common man wanted before. So I will try to address that in more depth tomorrow because I need to read about era of good feelings. So I see your response. So hopefully we're good on that. I'm adding that to my list because I want to remember to talk about it. Era of good feelings. I wonder, I'm going to probably use an APUSH review video for myself on that. I'm not going to play it right now. I'm just looking and see if it even exists. Look at that. He's got one on there. That's what I'm going to watch, Bethany, tonight to kind of prep my summary for it. Cool. All right, guys, if you have any other questions, I will do my best to try to answer them right now. If not, I'll go ahead and stop recording. And for my 16 people in here, does anyone have a request for time tomorrow?
I feel like 10 usually works well.
Yeah, 10 is pretty good.
Yeah, 10 works.
Yeah, I like 10.
Okay, sweet. I'm sure 10 might not work for everyone, but I just heard 5 people say 10 works for them. So that's what I'm going to do. Stop presenting. Speak up.
What is the significance of Marbury versus Madison?
That's a good question, and it establishes the precedent of judicial review. So what judicial review means, Madison, is that only the Supreme Court gets to determine what's constitutional. Now, the case itself is wacky. I don't understand the case. It is an insane case in my mind that I can't understand, but I can tell you the outcome of it. The outcome of the case And please, Madison, for the sake, if this was a legal class, I would be totally effing up my response. Because basically the Supreme Court determines that they are the only ones who gets to determine what's constitutional and what's not. I don't know if that sounds weird to you or not. You're telling me that the Supreme Court determined that they were the only ones that get to decide something? I don't know if I'm even explaining that well to you, Madison, but that is what the case is. The Supreme Court determines that they are the only body that can determine what is constitutional and what is not. Because of Marbury v. Madison, states can't nullify a law. Because of Marbury v. Madison, that nullification crisis happens. Because of Marbury v. Madison, the issue with Thomas Jefferson and the Kentucky and Virginia resolves over the Alien Sedition Act happens. Marbury v. Madison gives strength to the federal government because the Supreme Court is the federal government. Only the federal government can determine if something is constitutional or not. And even though the federal government doesn't always get things right, think about it, dude. If we had 50 states and every one of them had the right to determine if something was constitutional, don't you think that at least one state would find every single thing unconstitutional under the sun? I do. So we know the federal government doesn't always get it right, but having 50 states with the ability to veto it, I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. But that's the significance of Marbury v. Madison. Judicial review. Only the Supreme Court can determine constitutionality of a law, not the states. Bam.
Cool.
Uh,
Thank
Good
you.
question.
I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
It's from the period sheet thing that we
Yeah,
have.
review guide. Go ahead.
Um, one of the questions was identify and explain 2 examples of slave rebellions between 1800 and 1848. And I said Nat Turner's Rebellion is one, but then I'm not sure for a second one what you would use for a second one.
So I would talk about, what were these are the dates were 1800 to 48?
Yeah.
So an earlier one that doesn't fit within the time period, so I shouldn't probably mention it, but I'm going to. It's the Stono Rebellion of the 1730s. But here's what I would encourage you to focus on. Not necessarily an event. So Aaron, the first example is the low-hanging fruit, Nat Turner's Rebellion. That's the gnarly one where Nat Turner, receiving a prophetic vision from God, they murder like 49 white slave owners over the course of their rampage. Think about a source for the other example. David Walker's Appeal to Colored Persons of the World. That's that pamphlet written in the 1830s where David Walker, an educated former slave, encourages worldwide kind of this sense of Pan-Africanism. There's slavery in all these colonies around the world. Doesn't matter if you're West African, Central African, whatever. We're all kind of in this colonial oppressive mode together. We're all being, essentially our human rights are being violated across the globe by several different powers, whether it's the United States or Europe. We need to have kind of this Pan-African movement and violently overthrow slavery wherever it may exist. Now, David Walker's Appeal, that's it's a source. It's a document that's widely published. Certain slave owners are going to find that pamphlet has been smuggled onto their plantation. If you're a plantation owner and you find that your slaves are reading David Walker's Appeal, it's probably going to scare the crap out of you. So even though David Walker's Appeal isn't an event, it kind of is. The publication of it is an event. So I would use that for my answer. I would use Nat Turner's Slave Revolt, and I would use the document, David Walker's Appeal to the Colored Persons of the World.
Okay, because I was going to use something like that, but I didn't think it was an event, so I wasn't quite sure. That makes sense.
And, I gave you a 30-second version of David Walker, but you could Wikipedia David Walker's Appeal. I see that source on the AP test a lot. Normally is a multiple choice source, but, David Walker's Appeal is definitely one to know. And those are 2 examples of encouraging or actual slave revolt that fits within the time period they prescribed.
Perfect.
Did you say the title one more time?
Yeah, the author is David Walker. He's a black man. And the title is called David Walker's Appeal to Colored Men of the World or Colored Persons of the World. They have a section of it on it in the textbook, or just pull it up on Wikipedia for one quick second. But yeah, those are 2 good examples. David Walker's Appeal is the short version of it, Madison. If you'd call it David Walker's Appeal, the graders on the test will know exactly what you're talking about. Cool. Great questions. Anyone else got anything? Cool. We'll go ahead and stop recording.